So hello everyone, we will add just a few minutes to the attendees the time to enter this webinar. Hello everyone, welcome to our third webinar co-hosted by IVADO and MEDTEQ. My name is Barbara Decel and I am the Health Research Advisor at IVADO. I will co-animate this event with Milette Bourreau from MEDTEQ. And before to start, I'd like to thank especially Yannick Saint-Germain for his help and support for the organization of this event. So today we will have a very exciting program about brain-computer interface and neuromodulation. Please, Milette, could you change the slide? Thanks a lot. So first, Milette will introduce you to both concepts of brain-computer interface and neuromodulation. Then we will have the chance to hear about the state-of-the-art from academic experts and innovators. We will hear Naem Komilipour, founder and CTO at AVA, Benoît Gosselin, full professor at Laval University, Pierre Wijden, CEO and co-founder at Neuraura, Marco Bonizzato, CTO at NeuroDrive, Jorine Mamen, Canadian Operations Manager at BIOS Health, and finally, Guillaume Lajoie, core academic member at Mila. So before to turn the floor over to Milette Bourreau, I will give you a brief presentation of IVADO. So IVADO is a university-based institute at the interface of academia and organizations that catalyzes the development of knowledge and talent in artificial intelligence in the broadest sense. So when we say artificial intelligence, we mean basically statistics, machine learning, operations research, and deep learning, with a view of its adoption by stakeholders to create societal and economic value. So in a few numbers, IVADO have found 69 fundamental research projects. We also have participated to more than 273 collaborative research projects with various university centers. We have also trained more than 9,000 people. And finally, IVADO is a very large community of over 1,400 researchers and over 100 industrial members. So I would like to finish the IVADO presentation by introducing the IVADO community. So at the heart of our ecosystem, you can see our research centers like Mila, which you probably already know, but also the Tech3 Lab, which is the largest UX research laboratory in North America. In the middle circle, we have provincial and international partners such as EMS, which is the Institute of Mathematics in Africa. In the last and most external circle, we have our industrial members. You can see that our members belong to various sectors, and this diversity that make our ecosystem so rich. So if you are curious and want to know more about IVADO and our activity, I invite you to follow us on social network or to contact us directly. So now, Milette, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Barbara. Hello, everyone. So my name is Milette Bourreau. I'm an Integration of Innovation Manager at MEDTEQ+. So our mission at MEDTEQ+ is to accelerate innovation in the field of medical technologies and more broadly in the field of health in Canada. We accompany and support Canadian companies along the innovation continuum from idea to commercialization. So briefly, MEDTEQ+ is an industrial research consortium funded by the government of Quebec and more specifically by the Ministry of Economy and Innovation. We are firstly a pan-Canadian and international network with more than 200 members, and the majority of these members are companies, especially SMEs, and our members also include institutional partners such as university, hospitals, and research centers. Benefiting from professional funding, we are also funding the organization through our numerous collaborative project program between our industrial and institutional partners in Quebec. We are very proud to have funded more than 100 collaborative projects since the creation of MEDTEQ+. Since 2017, MEDTEQ+ also has benefit from federal funding, which has allowed us to create 3 other programs. A coaching program named AIM program, allowing selected companies to benefit from the expertise of our consultants. We also have the Beachhead program based on a call for proposal, which is a partnership between a clinical center of excellence and a company to accelerate the adoption of value-based innovation. This call of proposal aims to provide companies with privileged access to validation service in a real care environment and support the generation of commercialization evidences. And our last program is a MEDTEQ Invest program that directly funds startups and SMEs in the commercialization phase. So this slide allows you to see how MEDTEQ+ provide support to companies along the entire innovation continuum, from the idea to the commercialization, with our various programs that I just presented. So if you have any question about MEDTEQ+, I will be happy to answer them during the discussion period. So today we have the privilege to listen the expert in brain-computer interface and neuromodulation. So before giving the floor to our guest, we wanted to give you a short introduction to these 2 concepts. So brain-computer interface, or BCI, are systems that allow communication between the brain and various machines. This can be done invasively or non-invasively. The first application of BCIs is to replace or restore useful function to people disabled by neuromuscular disorders, such as ALS, stroke, or spinal cord injury. Here are 2 examples of application of BCI with a robotic arm and a prototype of exoskeleton that was published in the prestigious The Lancet Neurology 3 years ago to treat cervical spinal cord injuries. Neuromodulation is not a simple communication between the nervous system and the device. Neuromodulation is a technology that acts directly upon the nervous systems. It's the alteration or modulation of the nerve activity by delivering electrical stimulus directly to a target area. There are various techniques to do that, that can be done, that can be invasive, or non-invasive. So the most common neuromodulation treatment is the spinal cord stimulation for chronic neuropathic pain. And in addition to chronic pain relief, other neuromodulation treatments are now used or studied, including deep brain stimulation for essential tremor in Parkinson's disease, epilepsy, and other diseases such as depression or obsessive compulsive disorder. So we choose to present these themes in this webinar because these fields are in expansion. We can see that in academia, here it's a 2 screenshots from PubMed. We can see that BCI and neuromodulation are more and more studied, as shown in this picture. And we can see that the number of publications about BCI and neuromodulation are increasing for 3 decades now. And in parallel, we can see that the global market for BCI and neuromodulation are booming. We have a prediction of a 5-fold increase in the market size in these 2 areas, bringing the BCI market at $5.4 billion US in 2013, and the neuromodulation market at 22 billion. So the growth of this market are driven by the factors such as growing prevalence of neurological disorders, incidence of chronic disease, and rising geriatric population. So now I'm gonna let the floor to our first speaker, Naim Kopilipo, founder and CTO at AVA. So I'm gonna stop the screening, the sharing, sorry.
Thank you very much, Milad. It's my pleasure to be here. Do you see my screen?
Yes, Naim.
Perfect. So, hello, my name is Naim. I'm glad to be here, and I'm the founder and CTO of AVA. With AVA, you can hear what you want, hear what matters. Imagine these scenarios. You're in a noisy cocktail party and your friends are talking around you. You either want to know what they're talking about, or you simply don't care and want to enjoy the background music. Or you are a construction worker in an active site and your boss is telling you something very important that you cannot miss. Or simply you are among the majority of seniors who cannot hear well anymore, especially in noisy environments. AVA is providing a solution to the shortcomings in these scenarios by developing a first of its kind bionic ear that allows users to enhance what they want to hear by understanding what sounds they're paying attention to through interpreting their brain and biosignals. As a first of its kind device, we are developing an end-to-end solution from innovations in biopotential sensors to hardware that processes the data, the design of the device that houses it, to the algorithm that processes the sound, and the ability to understand the attention and subtle commands just from brain and biosignals. Because of the multidisciplinary nature of our project, we have partnered with several world-leading researchers in various fields, both in Canada, such as McGill and Queen's University and CEGEP Maribacterium, as well as internationally in Germany and United States, to push the cutting edge in these fields in order to make a first of its kind device. To solve this problem faced in noisy environment, our patented technology gives user control of any environment. Simply from the neural activity we record, we can decode users' auditory focus among many sounds, as well as their gaze direction, blink, and other subtle commands. Incorporating inertial signals, we can understand the head orientation of the user. On the other hand, using sound input, we can understand the user's environment and separate the sounds of interest out of a mixture of sound. All of this information can be fused together to allow users to hear the desired sounds much clearer. This is how these technologies work holistically in our end-to-end solution. It begins by collecting sound from the microphone and brain and biosignals from our own custom-made sensors based on novel developments in conductive nanomaterial polymers. These collected signals are stored in our custom hardware built for on-edge real-time computations, protected by our own ergonomic design, which is designed to increase the quality of the collected signals across users of different head or ear sizes, hairstyles, and other variables. The core of our technology, the neural decoders, are based on novel approaches in artificial intelligence that are computationally light and capable of real-life use. And we use these decoders to process the brain and biosignals to produce attention and interactivity commands, which then inform our acoustic algorithms of which sounds to separate and enhance, which is finally provided back to the user as an enhanced audio, all within a matter of milliseconds. To develop our solution, we validated the ability to detect attentions from brain signals using traditional laboratory setup, and then swiftly advanced through several iterations to our current headphone prototype, which also constantly improving our software, initially performing offline with a low accuracy and long delay to where we are now, operating in real time with high accuracy. We continue to improve our prototypes, which is now being miniaturized into fully around-ear and eventually in-ear reference designs. Because of our platform reference design will be device agnostic, our technology is poised to address several markets, in addition to our beachhead hearing assistant market. These include visual enhancement, where our technology can be used to control a virtual menu by using attentions and subtle commands, hearing protections, where operators could reduce damaging noise while still being able to select and enhance voices or alarms, or other advanced applications in interactivity, including gaming, education for people with autism, attention disorders, and many more. Along these lines, we have already entered into discussion with several OEM partners who are interested in integrating our technology into our devices, which expect to materialize into deals in the coming days. So to make this happen, we have a top-notch team with expertise in business, science, and engineering. To sum up, AVA is an infant baby that is growing up very fast. We already achieved significant milestones in technology as well as business development. Our plan is to grow the infant AVA into a mature product to impact the lives of millions. And with that, thank you very much. And I would be glad to answer any question you may have.
Thank you, Naim, for your exciting presentation.
My pleasure.
So do we have any question from the audience? So if not, I can start. Maybe we have one. From Isabel Creek, did your product was tested on people on the spectrum?
On people with, sorry?
On the spectrum.
Yes, yes. So we are right now both testing at our offices. We're testing normal participants, and at McGill we are testing people with hearing impairment. So getting their feedback, incorporating their feedback, and making modifications into the design as well as our software. So we'll keep testing the users all the time, as well as putting our devices in the hands of some of the industrial partners, again, to receive feedback from them and keep improving. So the goal is to build something that is both useful for normal users, people with hearing impairments, as well as now we are working with the companies, AR and VR companies, so to be able to integrate in those devices that well.
Great, thank you. Maybe another question. How do you manage the variety of the sound backgrounds to train your algorithm?
Could you repeat it again?
How do you manage the variety of the sound backgrounds to train your algorithm?
So for our sound separation algorithms, we have two different approaches. So we have one purely signal processing approach, which is called beamforming. We separate the sounds directionally using more than one microphone actually. So we have a 5-degree resolution. We can separate the sounds in real time with a delay of 8 milliseconds. So directionally, so from a specific angle. At the same time, we have developed and we are now testing a very light computationally light AI model that we trained it on a large data set that is capable of separating sounds even if they come all from the same directions. And then we actually, our model is the state of the art, both in terms of signal to noise ratio, as well as the latency, because the existing AI models are not capable of working in real time.
Just maybe a quick last question. How many people have already tested your product, and are the results significant?
We have tested, like in terms of testing, we have tested around 50 people right now, but we have a plan to, in the next 3 months, to test 100 people. But the good news is that we don't do research here, so we don't publish. You put your device and you see the result in action. So we have demo and prototypes that work in real time, and then we showcase this to people. So we do the testing in order to gather data, train our models. When the models are ready, we are keep showcasing that in real time, in real life scenarios.
Okay, maybe the last one, or do we let the question for the panel discussion?
Sure.
So
with that,
thanks a lot, Naim, for this very insightful presentation. Now we will listen Benoît Gosselin. Benoît is full professor at Laval University. Benoît, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Good morning, everyone. Okay. All right. So good morning. So I'm a professor at the Department of EC at Université Laval in Quebec City. And I hold the Canada Research Chair in Smart Biomedical Microsystems. So my lab is working towards two main major projects. We are designing a small wireless implantable platform to observe the development of Alzheimer's disease. So we are basically developing a small BCI for laboratory mice that can give a view in real time on the brain microcircuits of disease models. In the second project, we are developing a smart end prosthesis driven by data and artificial intelligence, which is also a kind of brain-machine interface to some extent. So I will give more details about this project during the presentation. But first, I will start with a short overview of the direct brain computer interfaces and neuromodulation area. So direct brain computer interfaces are systems that are directly in contact with the central nervous system for observation or control purpose. These direct BCI are now transiting to clinical applications. So I have three examples mixing actual medical devices and future applications based on BCI and neuromodulation. First, the company Neuralink is working to establish a direct connections with the brain to control computers and mobile devices. The goal of this technology is to help people with paralysis to regain independence. Second example, neuromodulation is often used when medication is not effective. So a neural-based system combines observation with neuromodulation to provide a closed loop so it can detect abnormal neural activity and block seizures in real time. Then closed-loop neuromodulation can also be used to control the activity of the spinal cord and repair or bypass any broken path, as demonstrated in Grégoire Coutin's lab at the PFL in Switzerland. These systems mostly interact with the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system in the electrical domain using electrical stimulation. But several systems are now also including other modes of interaction like photoelectric interaction, which is very powerful. Light can be used to excite and stimulate neural circuits with great benefit, in fact. So a technology known as optogenetics uses pulses of light to control neural activity. This is done by introducing opsins, which are photosensitive protein inside neurons. The big advantage of this approach is its excellent selectivity, because it has the ability to activate or inhibit very specific type of cells or neural circuits, which cannot be done so easily with electrical stimulation. Optical neuromodulation could clearly benefit the medical devices area if it can be successfully applied to humans. For instance, potential applications include non-invasive target pacing. With optical neuromodulation, electricity is generated with inside the neural circuits when the opsins are activated by light. So measuring the electrical response using proper electrophysiology method allows to track and observe the brain response to any type of stimulus, like the optical stimulation itself or drugs. So I have a project funded by the Weston Family Foundation to develop a small BCI to observe the development of Alzheimer's disease in models. In this project, optical neuromodulation and electrophysiology are used in closed loop to interact with the neural circuits in real time and test different hypotheses. So we developed a lightweight end-mounted wireless platform to power up LEDs, which are used as light sources, and to perform low latency on-chip processing of the sense brain signals. So it allows to control the photostimulation in a closed loop. The brain circuits establish their connections very quickly, so closing the loop requires a very fast response time. Our approach consists of performing data analysis locally, directly inside the system to avoid latency or network instability. So a custom chip was designed in my lab and used inside the Untitled platform to analyze the neural activity locally with very low latency. The chip includes 3 digital microelectronic processing core to quickly perform 3 important tasks in real time. So they perform signal detection, feature extraction, and signal classification locally to control the photostimulation with low latency and allow to properly closing the loop. This chip basically allows to find and repair any broken circuit connection very quickly. So we have designed and validated our end-mounted system with Dr. Yves Daconing's group at the CERVO Research Center in Laval. Our test results with freely behaving transgenic mice expressing inhibiting opsins show that the platform can successfully detect and block any abnormal activity by issuing light pulses only when necessary. So I think the molecular tools platform at CERVO for providing the transgenic mice used in these tests, and all tests were performed under proper ethical approval at the Université Laval. So quickly, my lab is also interested in developing a wearable human-machine interface, which can be considered also as a brain-computer interface too. We recently obtained a 1 million collaborative grant from NSERC to develop a smart myoelectric end prosthesis with the project partners CIUS Capital National and the startup Bio6 in Quebec. So this project also includes a collaboration with the University of Oslo and the University of New Brunswick. Our prototype can recognize 12 hand gestures in real time, with a success rate of 98% using deep learning and transfer learning. So this concludes my presentation. I'm finishing with a summary of my partners and sponsors. Simon Tam, Olivier Tsakaka, Gabriel Gagnon-Turcotte, and Guillaume Bilodeau are the leaders in my lab involved in this research, and they contributed to this presentation. So thank you very much. I'm open for questions.
Thanks a lot, Benoit. So now we'll take the question. So while you take the time to ask your question in the Q&A, I will ask you one question, Benoit. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of non-invasive BCI? So for instance, EEG-based systems vs invasive BCI based on an individual cellular responses.
So yes, so we have direct brain-computer interface like those that I presented. Then there's also another type of brain-computer interface, which is non-invasive, which is basically a wearable technology that can measure electroencephalographic signals on the scalp with an helmet, and just like Naeem presented, with the headset with a small device, and so. These different BCI are very different. So the first one, the direct, is very invasive, very difficult maybe to put in place, to install. It requires some intensive surgery, and this is transiting smoothly to some medical application, hopefully very soon. But the big advantage, of course, of the encephalographic based BCI, the wearable one, is that is fully non-invasive. So the signal that you can measure with this BCI are somewhat a little bit more complex to analyze. Requires some very intensive signal processing and data analysis, but it has the big advantage of being non-invasive. So the invasive one, on the contrary, has access to the source of the signal, so might maybe provide more precise control.
Thanks. Do you know if even if it's non-invasive, some people might have some challenges to wear a wearable?
Of course, yes, this is a very good point. So that's why the technologies like the company of Naeem is developing is very important, because nobody wants necessarily to wear an helmet with this technology, and so it's not very convenient. So having some non-invasive or some technology that is not visible to measure these signals is very critical and important.
Thanks.
It was a very important issue.
So we have a question from Isabel Creek. How the device adapt to neurodiversity of the brain?
Oh, yes, thank you. Very good question. So I think we rely basically on the on AI here to on all the data analysis part and then where we put as much as flexibility as we can to accommodate different type of signals, different type of circuits. And basically, this is really, I think, on the data analysis part where we must have flexibility over there with some programmable aspect that we can use in the loop of with their hardware.
Thanks. So maybe one last question. So what are the sources of motivation in this research at the interface of neuroscience and engineering?
Thank you for the question. So this is a very motivating area, of course. So we work with people from very various disciplines to work on developing this technology. So this is very motivating, doing this research, and also so it has the potential to help people and lead to discovery that will also understand help to understand diseases, very important disease. So it's very motivating.
Thank you, Benoit. Thank you, Barbara. So now we will listen to Pierre Wijden, which is the CEO and the co-founder of Neuraura.
Thank you, Milad. All right, I guess you can see my screen.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for having me here. It's really a pleasure. So my name is Pierre. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Neuraura. It's a company that is based in Calgary. Behind there is more than me. There is a lot of people that support us from different fronts. As it was just mentioned by Benoit, I think one of the pleasure that we have working in the field is how interdisciplinary it is. You work with people that have experience in different type of innovations, electronic, biomaterials, signal processing, but you also work with a lot of clinicians. You work with people that understand the regulatory ecosystem and how we can build devices that meets the requirements. And then people that have expertise on how you can distribute all these equipments to hospitals, because at the end of the day, when you think in our case of a medical device, you have doctors that need to have access to that technology for their procurement system, and that is an entire different world. And so really, I think one of the pleasure that we get is on our sides to work with so many people that bring and share their expertise in the domain. Now, if we look at the field of today, like Benoit has mentioned, type of implants that goes inside the brain, and has also mentioned about new pace and here on the slide, and it's here, like brain implants are here. They follow the similar trajectory that pacemakers for the heart have been following over the last 3 decades. And now we do have, hundreds of thousands of people implanted with heart pacemakers and saving lives every day. So brain implants are there, and they have proven to be extremely helpful. Epilepsy, Parkinson's disease, OCD, Tourette syndrome. There has been studies showing on how neurostimulation can help with other type of chronic disorders like addiction, depression. And here we are just talking about implants for brain, but there's also what we call a lot of below the neck applications. When you think about bladder control, chronic pain, those implants have been proven again and again to be effective when they are well used. And this is kind of the point of what we're doing at Neuraura. Today, in certain conditions like epilepsy, they actually work in 1 patient out of 2. And because they are working in only 50% of the patients, the adoption rate is actually quite low. And it is mainly due for 2 reasons. First is it's still a blunt stimulation when you think about it. There's a lot of research happening on how we can better listen to the brain to actually stimulate accordingly and provide a stimulation protocol that match the requirement for the patients. And then the placement of the electrode. So the brain, you know, like every brains of the people in that call today are slightly different. They're not exactly the same. They have some variations. It's genetical, but it's also the environment they grow in. It's also the way they will interact in their life with the environment around them. And as a result, the placement of the electrode needs to be more personalized. And that results in 50% of efficacy of those devices. And therefore, we see opportunity that we increase that numbers and make those devices more efficient. Here, what we're really talking about is making treatment solutions that are more personalized to the patients, the same way that the pharma field is trying to do it as well with drugs. To do that, what we're doing at Neuraura is that we're developing our own what's called intracranial electrodes. So they are tiny electrodes that goes inside the brain and that can be attached into neuromodulation devices to better sense the brain. Based on the signal we capture, we have a much better understanding of what is happening in the patient's brain. We have published a white paper that is on our website. We have also a few publications that demonstrate our ability, for example, to detect biomarkers, which are tiny signals buried inside the actual signals of the brain. And those biomarkers help us understand Parkinson's disease, depression, epilepsy. They help us understand, for example, also what's happening in the brain between two seizures, something called interictal events. And so the ability to do that allows us then to map the patient's brain at a higher resolution and define with precision where we should do stimulation in that specific patient. How can we be the most responsive as possible? I won't go too much into the data that we collect, but this is just an example on the left side of what people look at when they look at electrical brain activity using typical brain sensors today, and what we can look with our electrodes. We have demonstrated that over and over. Again, more data can be available on our website through a white paper. It's really about understanding, again, how we detect activity, how we can listen to the brain first, and then talk back to it with neurostimulation, which is the same language that the brain is actually using to communicate. Just a quick overview, just also to thank kind of the field, the community around us. Like, this journey would not be possible without all the support that we're getting in Canada. We have an amazing ecosystem here in Canada. You know, we created, so I came to Canada to do my PhD in 2012. We incorporated the company in 2017, and it was thanks to an accelerator program, the Creative Destruction Lab, that we were able to launch the company originally. This has been transformational for both people, I think us co-founders as individuals, but also for the company itself, and really help us understand where we could position our sensors and have the best impact for patients. Since then, we had grown the company, have been able to raise capitals. We actually just closed a small round. And that also was possible through all the different organizations around Canada and the US that we managed to work with. MEDTEQ obviously is a big one. I will mention also the Canadian Technology Accelerators and other ones that we have in Alberta, like the BioAlberta program, etc. That's really it for me. And I'm happy to welcome any questions.
Thank you, Pierre, for this exciting presentation. So, waiting the question from the audience. Maybe I have a few questions. How do you build such a multidisciplinary team that you showed at the beginning, which is really impressive?
It is, you know, finding the right people and the right talent is at the core of what we do. I mean, like, without the people, we are nothing. And so finding the people that have this passion, and I think that are driven by innovation and just don't accept the status quo and want to try to improve patients' life any way they can. I think that's the first thing that we look for. And then the skills and expertise, you know, it's when you build a transdisciplinary team in a field that is so new, you can't really expect to have everyone already with the skills already ready to go and apply them. So I think we are fortunate to be actually finding a lot of people from the university backgrounds, academic backgrounds, that have some experience in the field or that have this curiosity of or problem-solving mindsets that can be quite strong and help us in the field. And then I'm not gonna lie, the US is quite ahead of us in terms of commercialization of such implants or the regulatory process. And for all that part, we tend to look for the US. But in terms of technical and innovation, I think Canada has a lot to offer. And most of those talents, we find them in our backyard.
Thank you, Pierre. We have a question from Caroline Bazinet. To which ground truth are you comparing your research to make sure you have the right data and interpretation?
Yeah, very good question. You know, like that's something that I think the field has been struggling for really the last 20 years. We have seen a lot of devices out there, a lot of research application devices, but so few have made it to clinical practice. And I think there's different reasons for that. Either the signal itself or the quality of the data gathered were not actually that good, or they were not necessarily that relevant to the clinical field. There's a difference between what you do in research and when you do for the doctors and what they actually need on a day-to-day basis. For us, you know, of course, we look at publications. Of course, we look at what people are doing out there. We are always in interaction with researchers, with clinicians that also have their own labs. We are working with the Bionic Institute in Australia, with the Alfred's Iman Foundation in California, like big centers in the field of neuromodulations. Eventually, you know, what we do, and that's also what we have presented in a white paper, is that to compare apples with apples, we actually position always our sensors with the clinical gold standard today when we do an experiment, and we compare directly if it's better or if it's not. So it's really like, you know, based on the data we collect from publication, we can have an understanding of where to go. But down the line, it's always going to be a live test, if I may say, that allows us to understand how we compare to the gold standards used by clinicians today.
Thank you, Pierre.
Thanks a lot, Pierre. Thanks, Milad. So now our next guest is Marco Bonizzato, and he will present NeuroDrive. Marco, the floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Barbara, and congratulations to all who presented before me. That's quite excellent work. So I'm one of the co-founders of NeuroDrive and an academic. So I'm really interested in the science behind neural interfaces. What we're working on is neuromodulation, especially of the motor cortex, which is the center of the brain that controls voluntary movements, in order to help recover movement after a paralysis. I think I don't have to convince you that there is many benefits in the process of recovery, and we want to maximize that. So something that you might not know is that actually the costs associated are extremely high. We're talking about $1 million of direct medical costs over the lifetime of a person with spinal cord injury, and more than $50,000 of indirect costs per year. So all this cost and the loss in autonomy can be improved proportionally with a progressive improvement in return of function. And so the good news is actually that the brain is able to recover some function after an injury. So what can we do in order to help that? And we're working in neuromodulation, and I have to thank Pierre for having introduced already quite well what neuromodulation is and what is already available out there. So while I'm talking, you will see a gentleman with essential tremor and the demonstration of what the deep brain stimulation does in this case. So just so you know, this technology is already implanted in 10,000 individuals per year in North America. And it's one of the fastest progressing in terms of numbers, neurosurgical procedures. As I'm speaking, the medical doctor has activated deep brain stimulation, and this immediately restates the ability to perform fine movements of the hands. So a very clear medical benefit and a very clear gain in autonomy for the user. Now, brain stimulation has been used in Parkinson's disease, and in terms of movement, is often to suppress unwanted modes of the brain. But what if we want to use that to actually generate the wanted movement? So with Marina Martinez, we studied the neuromodulation of the motor cortex, and that is different from what I showed you before, in a sense that not necessarily, like, you cannot actually inject a continuous stream of excitation in the motor cortex. You have to do that in a way that is coherent with movement and the volition of the user. So we've been doing this preclinical research in animal models. And in the rat, we can have an incomplete spinal cord injury. And by stimulating the motor cortex, we are aiming at increasing this voluntary excitation of the motor circuits and increasing the motor performance. So this is how it looks like. After an incomplete spinal cord injury, this rat has a foot drop on the left leg. You can see that it drags on the treadmill every step. Now, in a second, we're going to activate spinal cord cortical stimulation, and immediately we increase this flexion movement. The posture gets up, the rat walks instantly better. We also showing that if we are training animals with cortical neuromodulation over time, and we turn the stimulation off, these rats are better than rats that only receive the same physical therapy on tasks that involve cortical control of movement. So voluntary movement, like placing a foot on a ladder, they can perform better, and stimulation has already been turned off. Also, while we stop the intervention 4 weeks after injury, the benefits are retained for several weeks after the end of the intervention. Now, I said neuromodulation is complex, especially in the motor cortex, especially when you have to provide like coherent stimulation with volition. And we developed an entire software suite in order to optimize the way stimulation is delivered. But I suspect actually that Guillaume is also going to speak a similar argument later on. So I'm just going to pass fast on this to show some more recent data on improving hand function. So after an incomplete cervical spinal cord injury, this rat has some deficit in the ability of grasping these pellets. So the performance has dropped to 28%, down for 75%, which is the score of an average IMEDTEQ rat. Now, after we turn stimulation on, instantly we can improve this extension and this hand opening movement. So we're increasing the success rate to twice or 80% of what is the intact score for this rat. We want to move to human. This is the objective on NeuroDrive. This is my personal scientific objective. And in order to do so, we are actually showing with the help of Dorothy Barthelemy that non-invasive brain stimulation in human that has effects that are similar to what we show with invasive stimulation in the animal. Yes, we are not selective. Yes, we are far from effective when we are outside of the brain, but the effects that we see in that are very much in line with with the characteristic of cortical stimulation in animal models. I'm finishing in by saying that you can actually join this vision. We are hiring. I'm starting at Polytechnique, the Science Neurotech Lab in a couple of weeks, and we are excited to continue working and moving the transaction of this objective closer to human.
Thank you, Marco, for sharing with us this amazing result. We will let people ask you a question in the Q&A while they type their question. I have one question for you. So how do you, we can see that you are directly in the laboratory, and you mentioned the fact that you work at Polytechnique. So according to you and in your day-to-day work, how does that give you a special position to be at the interface between academia and entrepreneurship? How does that give you an asset in the field of neuromodulation?
Yeah. Yeah, there's actually three of this. The background is great. When we are talking about a class 4 medical device in Canada, so the most invasive you can be, you're in contact with the nervous system, right? And that means, on average, for companies developing that, about 7 to 8 years from the first funding to commercialization. It's a huge, long runway. It's particularly expensive, and the technology is very, very deep, meaning that you never stop doing research from day one to the commercialization and over. And so I advocate for a model where academia and industry can both benefit from this interaction, because you need to incubate the technology in an academic setting. But at the same time, the academics need to get their scientific results outside from the laboratory in a real setting, where you can actually prove that what scientific elements that you're developing can make a difference for people. And these two are can be overlooked from one side or the other, and being at the intersection of that means being able to integrate that for, I hope, maximal efficacy.
Thanks, Marco. So you just mentioned that you want to pass to mice to humans. What kind of challenges do you foresee?
Yeah, so we have been working on several animal models, and so between species we're able to translate the results. Now, talking about locomotion, humans have the particular choice during evolution have decided to walk bipedally, and we're about the only mammals that are doing that. So there is something about the way our nervous system encodes locomotion that is different from animals. But at the same time, we developed a use of our motor cortex that is particularly refined. So what we think is that the result we see in animal will be amplified in human, and also that we'll be able to use this for hand function. I show you some example of hand function in rat, but you know that rat hand function has to be minimal. They don't do many different tasks. So in this case, an intermediate model is necessary, the non-human primate. But getting to that level of research requires ethically that we really solve the task in rats before we ask the same question in primates, what human or non-human. And that is a very long-term run, so that can actually benefit for academic funding. And this is where we are.
Yeah, so do you really think that also your technologies could also enhance our understanding of human brain and our way to move our hands, for instance?
Yeah, so I really like to focus on recovery instead of enhancing, but I mean there's
I was thinking just understanding, like
yeah, well, the understanding, yeah. So talking about the understanding, yes. I mean, it's science of neurotechnology for a reason, because only through deeply understanding the mechanism that we're studying, we can design tools that are effective. And this is the more true, the more you go invasive into in the nervous system. If you want to develop a technology that is so specific and so complex, then you really need to have understood the entire mechanistic chain of generation of that function that you're studying. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you for the question.
Marco. Thank you, Marco, for your presentation. Now we will let the floor to Joran, who is a Canadian Operation Manager at BIOS Health. So the floor is yours.
Thanks very much. And it's really great to be presenting alongside a group who's working on stuff so similar to what we're doing. I think a lot of the presentations we've seen so far have been very focused on the brain, central nervous system. And I think one of the distinctions here is what BIOS works on is more focused on peripheral nervous system. So let me talk a little bit about BIOS. So let me also move my screen here. So our mission is to cure chronic disease, and we work on a full stack interface, meaning both the calculations that happen behind the scenes in the back end and the interface with the clinicians at the front. And our objective is to work with third parties on a variety of medical applications, indications, and we're really helping to build the operating system for that. So the idea here is that if we can control the messaging between our brain and our organs, that we can cure chronic disease. And our vision is really that for many indications, we see software essentially replacing pharmaceuticals going forward. BIOS is really focused mostly on cardiac applications right now, but really we see the platform that we're building applying to multiple indications, including heart disease, diabetes, arthritis, and a variety of others. So really, we're taking kind of a three-front approach. We've got the software that we're developing. We've got like electronic hardware that's implantable. And we also have we currently have a class 1 medical device that's basically a smartwatch app that allows us to monitor certain aspects of patient health remotely and consistently. So just very briefly on BIOS, it's a UK-based company. It was founded in Cambridge in 2014. The Montreal office was opened in 2018, and the company was drawn to Montreal because of the strong machine learning, artificial intelligence ecosystem that's here, all of the health research that's here, the talent pool that we have here in Montreal. And so it's a small office for now, but growing. We're adding our 4th staff in Montreal next month, and the company overall is up to about 50 employees. And like some of my colleagues who've spoken before us, we're also hiring. So if you're interested, you can go to our website and look at our openings. So yeah, we've got the UK office, the Montreal office. Our preclinical research happens in both Canada and the US. And we also have a finance office in the West Coast of the US. So today I was going to talk a bit about a collaboration that we have. These are the stakeholders in that collaboration. It's a closed loop neuromodulation system. And so some of the other speakers have also talked about needing to move away just from sort of blindly stimulating the nerve and combining that more with listening to what's going on. So a lot of the research that we've been doing has been focused on recording raw neural data and trying to understand the signals that are hidden in there. So that's the main focus of this project. So Guillaume, who's going to be speaking next, is one of our partners alongside Blake Richards. Those are our academic PIs. And we have our founder and CSO, Oliver Armitage, as well as a neuroscientist named Pascal, who works with me here in Montreal. And so we've this project, which is financed by MEDTEQ, Healthy Brains, Healthy Lives at McGill, and MITAX, has 4 main objectives. First one is to build a synthetic neural data generator. So this is so that we don't have to constantly be collecting real, new, raw neural data, but we can sort of develop our own neural data and sort of hide signals in it that we can then use under objective 2. We can use it to go looking for those signals, develop algorithms that can find cardiac signals that are hidden in there. Objective 3 is working with contract research organizations to optimize our surgical practices so that we can record the strongest signal possible. And then objective 4 is to validate all that through chronic studies. So a little schematic of what we're talking about here. So we connect to the nerve, we record in this image on the right here, we've got 15 electrodes recording raw electrical signals. Because we've got multiple cuffs, we're able to see the propagation of signals, from the brain to the organs and from the organs back to the brain. And then we compare this with raw physiological data that is time coordinated, and we use machine learning techniques to look for signals in the raw neural data. So, as I mentioned, the current focus is very much on cardiac. The work that we have coming up, we're not quite ready to formally announce it, but we've got a strong probability that we've got another grant in the works for the next few years, where we're going to be not just stimulating the nerve in order to modulate cardiac function, but we're also going to be paying close attention to off-target effects on other organs. And the goal there is to optimize stimulations so that it's just affecting modulating one organ at a time without unwanted side effects. So once we have a strong understanding of those off-target effects, we can also strategically stimulate in order to affect change in those organs. So just a couple of quick pictures from some of the preclinical work that we've been doing. So it's really interesting to see the combination of computers and software with real physiology. It's quite a combination. I just also wanted to mention that under this first project, the first intern that we hired ended up getting brought on full time. So the next project that we're working on has 23 internship units as part of it. And it's just a system that works really well for us to partner with our academic partners and MEDTEQ, Healthy Brains, Healthy Lives, MEDTEQ. It's an ecosystem that works really well for the business being able to grow while benefiting from all the expertise that we have in the local universities here. With that, I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan, for this presentation. So maybe waiting the question from the audience. I have two questions. So you talked about the neural biomarker from multiple organs. So are you able to discover these biomarkers on the same nerve, or do you need to check several nerves to do that?
So the company is sort of nerve agnostic as to where we interface. The further you are from the brain, the fewer signals you can intercept, and vice versa. The closer you are to the brain, the more signals you can intercept. And certainly the company is able to identify, biomarkers is maybe, I'm not sure if it's the right word, but, signals that are associated with particular organ functions, cardiac function, breathing in particular. And in future work just on the horizon, we're going to be looking at sort of hidden metabolic signals as well, associated with pancreatic function and liver function and other such things.
Thank you. So another question, it's a more global question. What are the advantages of neuromodulation by electrical stimulation compared to the drugs that are used from the pharmaceutical field that also have neuromodulation effects?
Mm-hmm. So I think there's probably several, but the one that immediately comes to mind is that the body tends to become used to particular drugs. They become less effective over time. And typically someone will get a prescription for a course of drugs that might last for a month or several months. And the visits to the clinic are kind of few and far between and expensive and kind of a pain. So the potential that is brought by closed loop neuromodulation is that by listening to the nerve and listening to the messages between the body and the organs, is that you can respond more quickly to, if there's a decreasing effect of stimulation, you can either have someone remotely increase the stimulation intensity, frequency, those types of things, or it could even be automated. So I think the promise of neuromodulation is a greater level of responsiveness, not to mention that there's the potential to deal with, comorbidities, like multiple indications at the same time, because it's not that not everyone who just has issues with the heart. Sometimes people will have, cardiac issues and diabetes at the same time. And these systems have the potential to be able to handle multiple indications at the same time.
Thanks a lot, Jorin. So if there is no additional question, we will pass to the next guest. So we really hope you enjoy the talks as much as we do. Just to let you know that today we really have the chance to have experts from these tremendous topics. So after the last talk from Guillaume Lajoie, we really encourage you to ask your questions to our speaker, maybe in a more freely way to exchange. But first, I will let the floor to Guillaume Lajoie, a core academic member at Mila.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, and it's an honor to follow up on these tremendous presentations. A lot of the heavy lifting of framing challenges and the definitions of some things have been done. So I'll do my best to add value to the discussion here. So, oops, sorry. Here, this seems to be okay. Perfect. This is good. So as it's been done in earlier presentation, I think like the broad definition of brain-computer interfacing, I think can be summarized as something like directly interacting with neural activity in a closed loop paradigm. And as has been mentioned also before, there's a few different modalities in which that can happen. And one way I'd like to think about it is by thinking about these two axes. So there's both the invasive, non-invasive. So this is the modality of the device itself. Does it sit outside the body or is it implanted? And does it have an input like a writing? Are you writing information to the body, the nervous system, or are you reading it out, right? And of course, there's a lot of things that sit in the middle. Here are a few examples. But the reasons why I'm presenting this today is I think there's few challenges that are actually common to all of these modalities, all of these axes, and that are challenges for machine learning to tackle. And this is what I want to discuss today. So the first of these challenges, I think, is that neural signals are variable and noisy. That's not new. It's biology. It's wetware. Things are noisy. Second, and that's been mentioned in a few talks before, and notably by Pierre, is that every brain is different, right? And more than every brain is different. If you have an implant, the implants might not be at the right place. So from a machine learning perspective, it's a difficult problem because you can't train on huge data sets and expect data to be representative of many individuals. So there's variability in the actual source that needs to be taken into account. Third is that neural circuits are not stationary. They learn. That's the basis of how our body learns in general. And frankly, we don't know exactly how this thing happens all the time, right? Like plasticity and all of these things are fascinating components, but we don't have engineering level handle on these processes. So there's a lot of science to be done there. And fourth, there's limited data. And by that, I mean, because of the previous points here, it's not like we can garner a population data set, train like huge neural networks, get great performance. Often, if you have an implant in a new patient, you need to acquire data from that patient, and that can be expensive. You need to look at different stimulation parameters or different modalities, and that's a big problem for modern machine learning that usually gobbles data at the rate that's unseen before, right? So these challenges can be paraphrased by these quotes from some leaders of the field, right? So Elon Musk famously said that the challenge in addition to the hardware is to design adaptive algorithms that maintain reliable and robust performance while continuing to improve over time. And Thomas Reardon, who's the founder of Control Labs, that's been recently acquired by Meta, formerly known as Facebook, calls these the mother of all machine learning problems. So we got our work cut out for us. And I'd like to show, note here that part of the work in my lab is to approach these problems. These are the main three categories of problems we're looking at for brain-computer interfacing. So first is the design of real-time neurostimulation optimization. Marco has alluded to some of this work that we've done in collaboration with Marco and other labs. Two is leveraging population data for personalized neural prosthetics, and I'll give you an example of this today. And third is to identify the guiding learning dynamics in the brain using brain-machine interface. So this is, I think, a super exciting sort of scientific and technological frontier. So I'm going to talk about two short examples of categories 2 and 3 in this short time. So first of all, okay, so here's the problem of leveraging population data for personalized neural prosthetic. That's a project that's led by my PhD student Shimeng Mao, and in collaboration with Stavros Zanos at the Feinstein Institute. By the way, all of these methods as well are kind of leveraged in other collaborations that we have, notably with BIOS. So the problem here is that for a lot of mapping between stimulation parameters and responses, biomarker responses, there's a lot of variability across individuals. So what I'm showing up here is on the x-axis of these plots, you have some biomarkers like EMG amplitude of a muscle or percentage of heart rate changes, or other types of markers. And then the y-axis, it's the individual fiber response in the vagus nerve that correlates with these biomarkers. And the different colors here are the mappings between these different biomarkers and nervous signals for different individuals. Like in this case, it's experiment on rats. And what you can see is that although there's some trend that's common to all of these, there's a lot of variability across subjects. And that has to do with the fact that the implants are not at the same spot, the nervous systems are different, and so on and so forth. So the question is, if you're acquiring a lot of data with a lot of population as you've deployed your device, how can you leverage this knowledge, which is precious, but it's not readily applicable. It's not like you can train a model on the mean of the population and deploy it and expect it to work on the individual. So this is a problem we're deciding to tackle using a machine learning technique called meta-learning, which is in a sense trying to learn sort of hyperparameters of learned models to do few-shot learning. So few-shot learning means that you can adjust already trained parameters to a specific task that's with very few data points. So I won't go into the details here, but with our meta-learning approach, the idea is that you can leverage population-fitted models and very rapidly fit individualized models for newly implanted devices. And so that saves times. And in a way, you can leverage this population data that you've acquired over the years, for example. And so this is an efficacy, for example. This is a plot of relative error with respect to few shots queries. So this is just stimulation with different stimulation parameters, and only with 5 or 10 few shot queries, we can see that our methods, these two bottom lines here, are very much more efficacious as sort of a base Gaussian process type of approach, which is in green here. So again, I don't have time to go much in details, but the hope is that this method here that's been applied to vagus nerve stimulation can be adaptable to other neuromodulation modalities as well. So it's very general. And then lastly, in the minute or so I have left, I'd like to talk about sort of this super exciting project on the readout side of things. So now forget about stimulation, but we're working in collaboration with the lab of Amy Osborne at the University of Washington. So this is a project that's been funded by the Simons Foundation and Google Research and IVADO. And it has to do with identifying and guiding learning dynamics in the brain using brain-machine interfaces. So the paradigm here is that a monkey learns to do sort of a visual control task using brain implants. And what we're interested in, this type of center-out task where the monkey needs to make a cursor move on the screen to different targets, has been done a lot in the past, but not a lot is understood about the learning processes, right? So as an individual is learning to use a brain-computer interface, what are the principles in the brain that guide the representations that enable this control? And so this project is thinking about developing co-adaptive systems that both take into account the learning processes in the brain. So, as opposed to just creating decoders of brain activity that are only there to successfully extract information from the brain. The idea here is to design co-adaptive decoders that is going to shape the representation of that are learned in the brain. And this is important to scale the use of BCI beyond low degree of freedom tasks, such as controlling a cursor on the screen, which can be done with, reading out the activity of 2 neurons, for example. But if you're going to go way beyond and control many degrees of freedom, it's important to have a principled approach to guide learning and representations in the brain. And this is what this project is about. So in summary, BCI technologies at scale are coming. They're actually here on account of the talks we've heard today. And I hope I convinced you that flexible AI approaches are needed for these unique properties based on, that is, neural interfacing. And these are variability, non-stationarity, and the need for co-adaptive paradigms. And with that, I will thank everybody that's funded us, and I'll take some questions.
Thanks a lot, Guillaume. It was really interesting. I will ask you a few questions while waiting for the attendees ones. So as you started with the challenges, maybe the opportunity. So if you just have one take-home message for the attendee in your field, what
one
will it
take-home
be?
message?
Yeah, one simple.
I think closed loop optimization is super important for the deployment of neuromodulation and brain-computer interfacing at scale. Right now, a lot of neural technologies, I would say, are in sort of a decoding paradigm, or like find the sweet spot and stick with it. But it's increasingly clear that if you want to scale it at a population level, or if you want to scale it in terms of degrees of freedom that you interact with, these closed loop approaches are needed. And so bringing in expertise from fields like control theory and machine learning, and not only sort of like signal processing, is going to be key in going forward, and leveraging what we know about the physiology of the brain as well, right? So it's not only an engineering problem, it's really a scientific problem as well, which is, I think, this is why I'm super jazzed about this, right? Like BCIs are like the whole package, right? There's technology, machine learning problems, and scientific questions that are very deep that are residing here. So
Thanks.
that's probably more than one take-home message, but
no, but it was a great messages. So we hear that some of you already collaborate on different projects. So you talk, for instance, of Marco. You also work with BIOS. So according to you, but how will you describe the ecosystem in Montreal and Quebec for this area specifically? Do you think it's a good place to be if you want to develop both science and technologies?
Yes, I think it is. I think the potential is tremendous, right? Like if you think about the neuroscience history of Montreal, I mean, it's incredibly rich, right? Like if you think about the first neuromodulation, it was done here at McGill, right? Dr. Penfield has a boulevard in Montreal, right? And arguably is the first really key neuromodulation type of invasive neuromodulation experiments. And it's no surprise as well that AI and deep learning is extremely well represented in Canada and Quebec and in Montreal in particular. And so the nexus of these two things, I think, is an incredible opportunity to get on board of these nascent technologies. And again, this is pretty early days for these technologies, and there is challenges such as the breakthrough, clinical breakthroughs. There's a lot of red tape there. But there's no doubt in my mind, this is one of the reasons I'm here, right, is that the nexus of both neuroscience expertise and artificial intelligence is there, and it's unequaled in the world, I think.
Thanks. So if there is no question from the public, we will maybe open. So first we will answer the questions that we didn't have the time to answer, and then we will open the question to all of you. We will try to have a more like maybe a natural exchange with the attendees. for the moment that we still have. So in the Q&A, we had one question for Naem. So I hope you will remember the the context name. So the question was, is the location of the sensors crucial? We see your helmet sensor all around the head.
Sorry, if the position of the sensors are crucial to?
Yeah, are crucial because the person that asked the question sees that in your helmet sensor, they're all around the head.
Yes, so we actually initially we started off using full cap, like using gel electrodes. Right after that, we started with dry electrodes, and we reduced the sensors to only around and inside the ear, because these are the locations that you can make wearable out of. And now what we are doing, the next step, now we have around and inside the ear, and we just develop our own first in-ear EG electrodes that goes inside the ear, and the next step is just to go inside the ear. So that's our plan. We have a different form factor. For example, with the AR, VR companies, we are working on their form factor. Practically, our attention tracking technology could go in any form, any head-worn form factor. But our focus, we are working toward implementing the technology around and inside the ear.
Thanks, Naem.
Sure.
So we have another question for you, Naem.
Sure.
Caroline Bazinet, did you ask insurance if they will be reimbursing this technology?
That's a very good question. Yeah, we are working. So actually in Quebec, that's the case. We are working. So to just clarify, we are building consumer electronic device. We don't claim to building hearing aids. The reason why we don't want to go through any FDA or any approval. However, again, our plan is B2B, means we want to do businesses with businesses. The devices that we are building are reference design. This is the job of our business partners to work with the insurances. But we have talked to a couple of companies here in Canada that they are willing, if we go through the B2C path, they are willing to actually work toward providing this through insurance to their employees.
Thank you, Naem.
Thanks, Naem. So this question raises maybe another and more larger question that I will address to all of our speakers. So according to you, does our health system is well adapted to the technologies that you present to us, or will it need like some adaptation, like for instance for the insurance, or like how to deploy it in the hospital? So does one of you would like to answer this question?
I can bring in like a point to the table, which is related to what Guillaume, which is here to me. I don't know for you, pointing in the raised at the very end. Like, it's so exciting, the potential of applying AI in brain interfaces, and we're putting so much effort right now. Something that is not ready from the health system with respect to that, but they are trying to prepare for that, is devices that change with time. So if you have an AI or like a different way to understand, to read out, and this thing changes day after day, there is nothing currently available in the regulation that allows you to do that in a smooth way. So you sort of have a new device every day. And can you imagine like having to approve a new device every day? It's like, well, it's a nightmare for us to go through that one time. And the FDA has published last year some guidelines on where do they want to go with that. So this will be available in the near future, but there is a lot of work that the regulators have to do, and also that the developers of technology will have to do to integrate that. And this is one of the key elements that we will discuss a lot about in the very next years.
Thanks, Marco. This is a really good point. Pierre, will you?
Yeah, just to add to that, I think you know, even I think if you think about the placements of the electrode even before you do any type of machine learning, what we have learned talking to many clinicians across the US mainly is that even though, for example, FDA will recommend regulates devices to be placed electrode in certain part of the brain where that has been tested, clinicians are in the front line. Clinicians see patients every day, and they will know often what will work best for patients. And we have seen actually clinicians going to place the electrode sometimes in different locations that was where the device was originally intended for, because they knew that was going to have an effect on the patients. And so, they can't communicate that much about it because this is typically not something that FDA told us or regulated. And so the ability, though, to listen to your doctors, I think, and to report on those is really what's going to bring the field forward. That's one aspect. I think we need to listen to the doctors more because they are the one facing thousands of patients every day. And, regulatory bodies need to kind of follow a bit more, be more in touch, I think, with what clinicians are seeing on a daily basis. The other thing is, if I take the example of epilepsy, it takes, I think, in average 22 years from the point you are diagnosed, from the time you even get a surgery, either for what's called resection ablation or implantation of a device. 22 years. By the time, 22 years happens, the disease has progressed in many different ways. And sometimes there's a point where for sure it's not treatable anymore because it's called, general seizure. It moves from something partial to something that is much more complex and generalized. And so, our ability for the system to be able to offer those therapies, sometimes not as a last resort conditions, but as something that could come earlier on, I think is something we need to be looking at. And I think that's what a lot of companies out there, large companies like Medtronic, etc., Boston Scientific, NeuroPace, are really looking to do right now. It's not focusing on the end of the pipeline and developing necessarily a better neurostimulation system, but actually how you push more patients through that funnel. Yes, that comes with, improving the reimbursement process and improving how we can offer the therapies to patients, but it also comes into how do we communicate to patients about those solutions, because many patients don't even know about those solutions out there. And as much as sometimes they can be scary, it involves often, if you think about an implant surgery, the result can be much better than taking drugs and having all this side effect that comes with it. So I think there needs to be maybe more open discussions and more awareness still. More work needs to be done into how we communicate the different solutions to patients. In epilepsy, that is mainly done by non-for-profit organization. I'm thinking about epilepsy.com, which is actually one of the largest epilepsy foundations in the world that funds, I think 75% of their project is outside the US. So even though they are based in the US, they fund a lot of things in the world. But more work needs to be done, I think, on those different opportunities by other organizations and maybe the government themselves.
Thank you, Pierre. Someone want to add something? Or we have another question from Caroline Bazinet. So it's for all of you. In this field, are there tables to help choose quickly the parameters needed to send the impulses? For example, wavelength, amplitude, depth in the brain, etc. It's a question by curiosity.
I can take a first stab. I know like a lot of us are gonna have answers here, but I mean, that's, of course, there's guidelines, right? Like that are set by regulatory bodies. Like you can't go above a certain amplitude of current or something like that, right? But beyond this, I think this is very much the challenge, right, for neurosurgeons and clinicians to actually tune these things, and so it's more of an art than tables or guidelines like this. Like this speaks to the challenges, which I tried to lay it out, at least in my talk, and we've seen throughout the webinar here, where this is one of the big challenges, is how to tune these parameters in an optimal way, in a rapid way, and in a personalized way. And so although there are tables, there's sort of rule of thumbs, that's very much kind of like hand tuned in the clinic nowadays, and it's kind of like set and forget in most cases. And so I think this is one of the challenges moving forward, but maybe others can contribute to that.
Maybe I guess I can just speak a little bit about the collaboration that we have with Guillaume's lab is quite focused on a comparison between just a basic grid search of, increasing amplitude, decreasing amplitude, increasing and decreasing frequency, and the shapes of the wavelengths and these different parameters you can change. So it's definitely a hot field of research for us, is reaching those optimal, the optimal combination of parameters as quickly as possible so that we can, calibrate the device quickly and without having to march through a grid search across 9 different dimensions.
Maybe I can elaborate also. Sure. So I think one of the main problem in applying BCI in real life, real-time scenarios, as Guillaume was mentioning, is that when you read publications, there are so many things that are taken for granted, like the way we filter things, the way we test our models. So, for example, one of the early problems we had, you build a model, it looks perfect in the result, but you just take off the device, put it back, the model doesn't work. This is something that is missing in academic literature, that you see that whether your model is robust to work over time. So what I'm trying to say is that from the academic side, I think one approach that is needed is to simulate real-time, real-life scenario, meaning that building neural decoders, for example, or paradigms that are robust over time and across subjects. So this is the main problem in the domain adaptation or transfer learning, is the main problem in BCI, which is actually missing in academic literature a lot.
Thank you, Naeem.
So yes, I agree very much. As it's been highlighted by several speakers today, and Guillaume and other speakers. So all brains are different, and there's lots of variability. So AI has been pointed as maybe a key here to address this fact. So for stimulation parameters, of course, sometimes it requires lots of tuning, as it's been mentioned. So we try to mimic as much as possible. Sometimes to start, the natural parameters of the brains in the circuits in terms of frequency, transient time intervals, duration, amplitude, but of course it always rely on the specificity of the circuit that we have. So and also for optical stimulation, if we talk in terms of wavelengths, so lots of different options. All options are in the currently in the visible range. So we have blue, yellow, red, but hopefully we'll get to some infrared as well, where we can get more penetration inside the tissues and be able to do much more things non-invasively at some point. So that would be a huge improvement at that point.
Thank you, Benoit. So from Caroline Bazinet, she wanted to know if there is any recent textbooks that you recommended to learn or MOC.
I'll leave maybe the mention of textbooks to all the prof that are in that call, because I can't compete against the title they're gonna throw at us. But one other thing that we looked a lot on our side is, for example, the NeuroTech report. So if you just Google NeuroTech report, it is something put together by a group of people that are based in California and that monitor the neuromodulation and neurotechnology market on a monthly basis, and that produce articles, white papers, etc. It's maybe a bit more tailored towards the business and strategy world, but I think it's also written in a very layman's term, if I can say it this way, where it's very down to earth, very straight to the point, and kind of like shows the innovation in the space from different angles, either from brain implants, below the neck applications, artificial retinas, anything really in the space.
Thank you, Pierre.
Thank you, Pierre. So maybe to answer the question of Aura, I will get back to FDA regulation and certification, or how clinical trials are taken care of.
Actually,
so yeah,
Barbara, if I can actually jump on that one, if that's okay.
Of
I
course.
think the question from Aura is extremely important, and I really would like to make a point on that one. And I'm not sure if Aura based that question on an article that actually came out recently. And I think it is very important to talk about that. Second Sight, which is a really incredible company that is aimed at restoring vision or sight to people who are blind, have been working on a device before called the Argus system. That is basically an implant, an array of electrodes that is placed on the retina. Now, many patients have been implanted, and I've seen patients using that device, and it's just blew my mind. I still remember like leaving a ferry, a boat in Holland, and I saw a guy with that device, and he had this a dog, aged dog, and he had a white skin as well. And the guy was walking outside the ferry, knowing exactly where he was going faster than anyone else. And it just blew my mind that with these different aids, he was able to just gain back so much quality of life. Now, the company is moving into stimulating now the extrapyramidal lobe, which is directly the brain, and bypassing the optical nerve in order to have better results and better help patients. Because they have limited funding as well, and they can do so much, they decided to stop potentially supporting the Argus system, the original one. So I think the question is really relevant because we are just starting to see this, right? It's quite new because those devices have not been in the market for 50 years. So it's not like you upgrade an OS system and then you think it's going to be there for forever. An example is, for example, when Windows 98 was being not updated anymore, and all the banking systems were operating, or so many of them were operating still on 98 because it was very stable. And then what do you do? So at the end of the day, I think we need to adapt, but I think companies who provide such devices probably have a certain responsibility that indeed needs to be regulated also by regulatory bodies like FDA, Health Canada, etc., to at least maintain the system and support the devices to the same level that it was when they offered it, or as far as it went. I think there is indeed a requirement to do that, and I think it's a fascinating story, and knowing some of the people at Second Sight, for example, I know they're going to provide the support that is required for the patients because they care, because I think everyone working in that field really care about what they're doing. But I think we're going to see more and more of those cases, and the question is going to be how do we provide optimally the support that the patients need. I don't know if anyone wants to add on this, but I felt the need to answer that question because it is something that is very relevant, especially given one of the articles that came out recently.
I guess I could just add to that it kind of depends on the context of how we talk about these new technologies. Sometimes it comes across as completely new thing that's never been done before and extremely groundbreaking, and there's an audience for that story. But I think we also have to remind ourselves that a lot of these devices are already in the marketplace. They're implantable devices that stimulate the nerve, that treat epilepsy, depression, that aid in stroke recovery. So a lot of the work that companies like ours are doing is finding new applications for these technologies. The biocompatibility, the safety of these implants is in a lot of cases already been proven. So we need to remind ourselves that while it's a big change in some respects, in other respects it's stuff that's already been done before and has already been proven to be safe.
Also, if I can add, when a company reaches the commercial stage, it's hard to define that as a startup or a small company anymore. Like we're talking about probably companies who was already public since a few years, that valuated on several $100 million, and they do have conspicuous funding. Either that or a business model that involves a supply chain that is already established. So for instance, being acquired at a certain point by a giant MEDTEQ, which will have the means to guarantee continued support. but creating devices that are complex also finds a barrier of being able to enter those in the market, because if they are complex, they will be automatically harder to maintain. And so the robustness question is one of the key ones. So the more you're adding on the technological level, the more you have to guarantee robustness over time. And I guess, I mean, this is also part of what we're trying to do when we are applying machine intelligence to optimization of these devices. Make sure that they're robust to any sort of perturbation.
Thank you all for your answers. And there is anyone that wants to add something? So maybe we can finish this webinar with the last question. How much neuromodulation and BCI will see in our clinics in the future, and how much will it enter in our lives? So it's an open question for all of you. How you see the future for this field?
Maybe I can jump on this one real quick. I just wanted to maybe come back to one of the questions that Joran had, right? Like with respect to the comparison with pharmaceutical interventions and neuromodulation. I think there is a big case to be made about neuromodulation as being very much more targeted to the actual ailment, right? Like if you think about pharmaceutical, and I don't want to knock on pharmaceutical treatment like this, they're very powerful. In a lot of conditions, there's very critical problematic thing in either the nervous system or even in certain organs that can be, you know, addressed more in a targeted way with a neuromodulation, as opposed to just a big hammer and flooding the body with pharmaceuticals, right? So I really think that better parsimony of where to use more targeted treatment versus more widespread, just use pharmaceutical everywhere is going to be a big change in the coming decades, right? I hope it is, because from just the outside, it makes more sense, right? So I think only this, right, just treating things better with neuromodulation, not just like things that we couldn't treat before, is going to be a huge opportunity. And I hope that we see a headway on that front. So that's my point about the future.
So of course I'm an entrepreneur and dreamer, but I guess one reason why we can actually imagine that neurotechnology BCI will be really why we will see it as a widespread use in the near future is because the amount of money that is pouring into this market. So you have from one side public and private sectors, and there's a huge amount of money pouring in this market. What does this money do? It accelerates the rate of innovation in the field. And then the fact that when we see a device like a wearable or a consumer electronic incorporating neurotechnology, I think there's no way backward anymore. So to me, in future, not only non-invasive, I think we'll see more non-invasive as all the speakers mentioned. Invasive has been around for a while. So deep brain stimulation, cochlear implants have been around for a while, but I think the next generations of neurotechnology that will revolutionize the field is non-invasive, such as FNIRS. For example, there's company Kernel working hard on building these wearables that can read the brain activity non-invasively. And I think in the next decade, we'll see consumer electronic devices, VR, AR headsets, headphones, glasses, incorporating some sort of not only brain, but biopotential sensors, because all the huge companies around the world are actually working. They have research and development team building sensors, working on the problem. So to me, we will see neurotechnology soon in the future becoming mainstream.
Thanks a lot, Naim. Does anyone want to build on what Naim and Guillaume said? I don't see any hand. So it will end up our webinar. So thanks a lot to all of you that have participated. As we have registered this webinar, we will make it available on our YouTube channel. We were really happy to have you today, and we hope to hear from your research or a new technology very soon. Milad, do you want to add a last word?
Thank you all for your participation and for your presentation. It was very interesting and exciting. And I just want to thank again Yannick Saint-Germain for his help for the organization of this webinar. And that's it. I think we had a great webinar.
We can finish by bon appétit.
Everyone, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
On t'entend pas, Barbara. Mais on va peut-être
Je vais vous rappeler, je vous rappelle.
Exactement.
On se rappelle sur le même événement.
Ça marche.